Hello, YouTube, and welcome to episode 1 of season 9 of Tomorrow's Talk Today. I'm your host, Jordan Ellerson, and today I'm joined by panelists Dalton Moore, Isabel Slushel, Jacob Williams, and Caitlin Croker on today's episode. We'll be discussing the bias and controversy within ESPN, particularly the favoring biases of the large schools and well-funded teams, what content ESPN should be reporting in viewers' interests. Our guests today have watched and analyzed a plethora of videos and written work on the topic, including YouTube breakdowns, scholarly articles, and interviews. To begin our discussion, let's take a quick look at a clip locked on Big 12 about bias reporting from ESPN.
Come out that the FPI has a glass ceiling for Big 12 teams, like factor in a really good bowl season. This all from Jeff Fuller. The FPI, the Big 12 can't crack the top 20. And in the strength of schedule, we saw number 44 strength of schedule Notre Dame beat number 1 strength of schedule Georgia. It is all weighted toward the SEC, weighted toward the Big 10. And it feels like it's becoming more clear that ESPN, the 4 letters that control the college football playoff, are putting more and more measures in place to hold the Big 12 back.
Well, as you can see from that, there are many opinions when it comes to how ESPN reports and ranks the SEC teams. Isabel, do you believe it is right for historically popular teams to receive special treatment from ESPN?
I don't think that they should necessarily receive special treatment, even though they're getting more viewers, because there could be that one Cinderella team, or there could be a team that is getting better because coaches change all the time, players change. There's the whole thing with the transfer portal. So I don't think that we should be specifically rooting for the teams that are just historically good.
Right. And do you feel that that's always been the case, or do you feel like recently with social media that maybe has increased just showing more of the same teams because now there's viewers involved?
I definitely think that social media does have an impact, just because you have that bias of if you want to go see Ohio or Texas specifically, you can go look at it, and then that's what your algorithm will show you. And so you're more biased towards that team, and that's what you'll see. But I feel like a lot of bigger ESPN in general is trying to make sure to have everyone represented.
Yeah. And do you guys feel Dalton, Jake, when you are on social media, do you feel like you see a lot of recurring stuff? Because maybe not being as involved and with sports and stuff, do you feel that when you are on ESPN broadcasts, etc., do you feel like you see a lot of the same teams?
In a way, yes, because the algorithm, we pretty much cater that to our own interests.
Right.
And also, obviously, if a team has been historically great in the past, obviously they're going to want to cover that more. I personally am a UVA fan, but I know Virginia Tech has always been significantly more popular. So if there's a game between the two, they're probably going to focus more on Virginia Tech. Mm-hmm. That's how it's always been, and that's probably how it's always going to be. And ESPN is technically a business, and the goal of the business is to make money. So if they're covering the more popular teams and the more popular, players, they're obviously going to attract in more viewers, and they're going to make more money.
Yeah. Do you have anything to follow up on that?
Not really, but I will say that being that I have a pretty unfiltered algorithm when it comes to sports, being that I'm not someone that really watches sports too much. So typically what I would get when I see a lot of sports is a pretty unfiltered outcome, just general news and stuff like that, just news on players. Maybe I'll see the occasional who won a game.
Yeah. And then so Caitlin, with that, if there's unequal distribution of media for teams, whether it's social media, ESPN, whatever it may be, do you feel that could then lead to unequal revenue distribution within?
Yeah, of course. I definitely think that's possible. I think when they favor specific teams or players, I think that leads to ticket sales, brand endorsements, fan engagement, stuff like that, screen time. I think that definitely changes the game up a little bit. I understand, if certain players are doing better or certain teams are doing better, they kind of want to showcase that. But I think that when you look at things like Alabama or Ohio, they're constantly showing those teams. But I do think that there are other teams that are doing just as good. I think when you look at the NFL, sometimes it's not even about the players themselves, it's about other things outside of the sport. If you look at Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, he was getting a lot of screen time just because of Taylor Swift. It wasn't even about the sport itself. So I think that when it comes to unbiased, it definitely boosts that, the revenue.
And do you feel that like a team's performance should have like an impact on how much media coverage they're getting? Because obviously there's things that like can go into how well a team is doing. Like in college, I know it's like obviously like you have like your teams that always make the top 20 or the top 5, and like you kind of expect those teams to end up being in the Final Four. And like every now and then, like I know for like women's lacrosse, like last year was like a huge deal when Florida made the Final Four, because like that was just not the normal. Like the normal is like Northwestern, Carolina, Boston College, etc. So like, is it fair for like those teams to get that hype and that media coverage? Because then you have a team like Florida who comes in and like maybe it's because they have the recruits that year, maybe it's because they have the facilities, the trainers, and then that also comes in with like the money aspect. So like, is that fair?
I think so. I think it's good to highlight the teams that are doing good, especially if they're putting in all the good work. But again, I think it's kind of just finding the balance, because of course you don't want to show a team that's losing over and over again, or a player who's not going to be put in the game as much. So yeah, I think it's finding that balance between showcasing the hard work of those teams that are doing good, and if it is the same team over and over, maybe kind of finding the balance in between that.
Yeah, you guys bring up some really good points, and I feel that like there's obviously going to be bias no matter where you go in this world, especially within like media and reporting in sports. But we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back here shortly, so stay tuned.
Rugby is power. From the scrum, to lineouts, to tackling, it promotes determination and rewards hard work.
Rugby is acceptance of any and every body type.
Rugby is teamwork. It is building a family and supporting them no matter what.
When we step onto the pitch, nothing else matters except for the game that we love.
Rugby is power. Power for women, power for the team, power for Longwood.
Welcome back. Next, we are going to be focusing on what ESPN should stick to as far as what they are reporting. So, obviously, we just talked about like the bias and like everything that comes in with that. And we're going to have a quick clip that comes from TYT Sports reporting on how ESPN has been caught silencing both athletes and journalists for speaking about things unrelated to sports.
The more we lean into politically charged commentary, the more we are alienating not just our core fan, but our casual fan.
That is Jimmy Pitaro, the president of ESPN. You see, Jimmy is blaming political undertones for ESPN's downward trajectory. He wants the network to focus more on sports and less on politics, writes the Post. I really believe that some of our talent was confused on what was expected of them. If you fast forward to today, I don't believe they are confused.
So ESPN stands for Entertainment and Sports Programming Network. Entertainment can cover when fields can be things taken too far, etc. So do you guys feel that sometimes things can be taken just a little too far?
Yes. So I think we do often forget that the E does stand for entertainment, and entertainment can obviously cover a whole array of things, not only just what's going on the field, but also their personal lives, who they're dating, all that stuff. And I think as a news outlet, it is important to cover this type of stuff, but I do also believe that it can get taken too far, in the sense where you could be talking about their personal lives, and maybe, you know, they don't want certain details to be shared out into the public for millions and millions of people to see and watch.
I agree. I think that sometimes, I mean, it's kind of also like celebrities. You know, you're going to be a public figure, so you have to understand that sometimes your life is going to be put out there and people are going to talk about it, but also I think that the reporters should also notice that they are human beings, and just because they are a public display doesn't mean that they should be talking about certain parts of their life in a certain way, just to get those views in.
Right. And so, Dalton, do you feel that that's like fair, or like obviously like you're signing up to like be an athlete, but do you think it's fair that when you sign up to be an athlete, you also are kind of signing up for that, almost like the word that I'm looking for is like you just kind of don't have like the security blanket of like not being a person, but like we obviously like are the viewers of someone else. Like, do you feel like that's fair?
Yeah, I see where you're kind of getting at, because like when you sign up to become an athlete, it's almost like you're also kind of like signing up to be less of an athlete and more of an actor for a show that ESPN kind of wants you to be part of.
Yeah.
And by that matter, you kind of lose your ability to say the things that you wish to say. I think, honestly, they should have that ability to say the things that they wish, even though, you know, yes, it is entertainment. However, sports is also entertainment for the people playing it, not just for the people watching it.
Right. So, like, Isabel, like, obviously we have ESPN Plus broadcasts here at school, and, like, there's commentary, etc. So, like, being familiar with that, do you feel that, like, ESPN announcers with these, like, high-level athletes, like, do you feel like the commentary ever gets taken too far?
I've never seen anything specifically with like commentary, but like on like news, I feel like sometimes they try to deep dive into certain athletes just to try and dig up something, which I feel like they shouldn't do. Like if something like comes up like now, like okay, but like why are we like going into something that they did 20 years ago, because they could change as a person. But I don't think anything that I've at least seen on the broadcast I've listened to has ever been like said on live.
Yeah. I feel like I see it more so in like, maybe it's more so like talk shows too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like it's like the guys who are kind of doing the like the kickback, overall lookovers of like the games, etc. Like maybe during the game it's not as obvious or as common, but like even just like the Travis Kelce Taylor Swift example is like, okay, like we're here to like watch them play, whatever, and then like they're bringing in the Taylor Swift side of things, and then all of a sudden people have opinions of Taylor Swift, and like now she's kind of like getting hated on and whatever, and like whatever you want to call it, but it's all because like what, she's dating Travis Kelce. Like would she be getting that same hatred, or would she be getting that same revenue benefits whether or not she was dating like him or not? But you have anything you want to add, Caitlin?
I mean, I think it's difficult because again, like Isabel said, I haven't seen anything in particular, but I do think that sometimes people try to dive deep into players' past.
Yeah.
And everyone has a past, but I think that a lot of times you'll see tweets that people made, or someone from their past will come out and say something about them, and it's only to the benefit of them to be like, oh, we're trying to kind of tear them down. And I think that's just not what it's about. You know, it's supposed to be about sports. It's supposed to be about the game. And I think that we kind of shift attention from that.
Yeah. Jacob, in the end, how would you describe like ESPN's overall reporting? Do you believe that they stick to factual reporting, or do they fall into discussing like speculations?
I think it's more so the latter. They can definitely fall more into the speculation aspect, and I think the biggest example is Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift. When they started dating, it was the tail end of 2023, and then she started going to pretty much all of the Chiefs games, and they were focusing on her as opposed to the actual game. And the Super Bowl, not this past one, but the one beforehand, a lot of people were, speculating that it was sort of rigged towards the Chiefs because they knew that Taylor was in the audience, and then a lot of people caught on to that and basically called them out. So I think in a way they can do that, but at the same time I do also believe that it is the fans that can determine who becomes popular.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we all can agree that there's a lot to consider here. But don't tune out just yet. We'll be right back to discuss ESPN's viewership with each of our guests here on Tomorrow's Talk Today.
Do you need B-roll for that next comm class project? If so, we've got that B-roll. Are you not Ryan Fletcher and you haven't attended every event? We've got that B-roll. Are you not Cole Pello and haven't taken photos of every event? We've got that B-roll. Do you need shots of students eating pizza or getting their Starbucks? What about some building signs? We've got that B-roll. Do you need shots of students pressing buttons? What about doing the other things that look techie? We've got that B-roll. Do you need shots of fall on campus or students making random mugs? We've got that B-roll. Do you need a shot of Taylor Reilly IV being inaugurated as the president of Log One? No! That's not B-roll. That's too specific. Do you need random B-roll shots with the tripod left in the background? What you don't like about the tripod in the background? I just left it there and it was great. Next time you have a comm class project, remember, we've got that B-roll for the low, low price of $19.99. You can have access to all our library of B-roll. Call 434-395-2384 today before they sell out.
Thanks for sticking with us to the end. To end our discussion today, let's take a quick look at a graph of the total visits in the last 3 months to ESPN by a website called similarweb.com. In this graph, you can obviously see that there's been a decline within the last 3 months of total visits of views that ESPN.com receives. But looking at the right side, we can see that there's obviously competitors like everything in this world, especially sports. And with viewership, you can tell that there is like obviously a high amount of people viewing the ESPN.com. And so obviously what they're reporting has an impact on what us as viewers are seeing. So with that, I feel that we can all agree that ESPN is kind of like what we all know. And so, Dalton, do you believe that the increase in women's sports being broadcasted with a 45% increase in viewership is maybe like a reason for just like the mainstream viewing like going up?
I would say that's a pretty logical thing to say, honestly, looking at the numbers. And then there's also with the popularity of her name is I'm forgetting her name, but she's been pretty popular within sports.
Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark.
Yeah,
Thank
basketball.
you. Yeah, she's been very popular. She's been an inspiration for a lot of women, and that is, that's been helping a lot bolstering the numbers.
Yeah, I think Caitlin Clark is a perfect example of an athlete who is not only like a woman in sports, but she's also just like a role model to like how she carries herself in the media. And I think that after like talking here today, like we can all agree that like being in the spotlight is not easy, and she is someone who has like made that seem as if like maybe it's not easy, but like it's doable to do in a mature way. And so like from like you all's perspective, like what do you guys like see within women in the media?
I think that women are getting more coverage in the media, but I also think that it's more specific players rather than the whole team, which I think like comparing that to men's, so that yes, there's like the few like players who get more of the light, like LeBron since he's been playing for so long, but you still see them talking about the Lakers as a whole, but most of the time you only see them talking about Caitlin instead of the Fever, which I think that over time hopefully it will get better, but seeing the coverage, it's just like Caitlin.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. I think that you kind of have to look at, they're choosing certain players to highlight. But if you look at those players, like what happens when they get injured, or what happens when they decide to retire or not be in that game? Do they just randomly pick someone else that's in the spotlight? Does the women in media kind of fade out, like if they don't have anyone else to go to? So I do think that it is good that certain people are getting highlighted because it is putting media out there for women in sports. But at the same time, like Isabel said, I think I would just like to see it be as the team as a whole.
Yeah. And do you guys feel that, like, obviously on that graph, like, we could tell that, like, ESPN was the most prominent, like, place for people to view sports and, like, information, statistics, etc. But what do you guys think is the reason for that, like, decrease recently? Because, like, obviously, like, as we saw, ESPN is, like, prominent. But for whatever reason, like, there is, like, a decline. Like, what do you guys think there is, like, that withdrawal?
I feel like a lot of streaming services are trying to get into the game, like Netflix is trying to get into live streaming, like with like wrestling and even the Christmas games and stuff. So I think a lot are trying to expand what they broadcast.
Yeah. You guys have anything you want to add?
I think it's the streaming thing, as well as what I was talking about earlier with, them favoring certain teams and certain players. So LeBron, obviously, you think of NBA, you probably think of LeBron James. You hear Golden State Warriors, you probably think Steph Curry. I think a lot of people have been catching on to the fact that they might be favoring those particular people more so than like the teams as a whole. I think a lot of that came from when the Lakers decided to draft Bronny Jr., who is not the best player, but since he's LeBron's son, they decided to just put him on the same team as him. It's a mix of that, and also, like I said earlier, it's the fans that get to choose who's popular. So if there's a certain team that's not getting a lot of coverage, on ESPN, but it's going like super viral on Instagram and TikTok. ESPN's probably gonna have to shift their focus over to that and be like, well, I guess we need to cover this.
Right. And I think as like anything, like give the viewers what they want. And if that's what we are showing as viewers, like if that's what we're engaging with, like it is partially like on our part. And so I think we can all kind of agree with that. But I'd like to thank you all for hosting and joining with me. This has been quite the discussion, but that's all we have time for today. I'd like to thank the panelists for their opinions and everyone behind the scenes for making this broadcast program possible. Be sure to subscribe to Longwood Comm Studies on YouTube to get notifications when the next episode is streaming. I'm your host, Jordan, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching Tomorrow's Talk Today.